who you are and a little bit about maybe Mile27, the history of coaching for you, and a little bit about your coaching philosophy.
Yeah, so I started online coaching back 2011. I came back from London, and I was doing some personal training, doing some coaching. I've always done a mix of coaching. Like I've did triathlon coaching back in the 90s and always done a combination of training clients in the gym, preparing them for marathons, triathlons, etc. And then in 2011, I got an email from a guy saying, "Oh, do you do online coaching?" And yeah, of course I do. Yep, I do that. So I managed to scramble behind the scenes to get the website looking like I actually did online coaching and get it up to scratch. So that started in 2011, and within probably a year or so, online coaching had become at least half of my business in terms of personal training and online coaching. And I kind of thought to myself, well, I'm early 40s. I want to have kids. Do I want to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym and spend 4 hours at the gym, then come back in the evening and do 4 hours in the gym when I'm 50 or 60?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I want to do more time on coaching? Now, I always wanted to do more coaching, but back in the 90s and stuff, or even early 2000s, having a full-time job as a coach just wasn't really an option unless you were working at AIS or something. There were very, very small opportunities to spend 100% of your time coaching people. So I'd always done personal training as an adjunct to that. But when this came along, I kind of thought, well, now is an opportunity to go full-time and just focus on what I love to do, which is coaching. So I kind of backed off the PT, spent more and more time on the online coaching stuff, and within kind of 2.5 years was 90% of my income was full-time. So we left Sydney, moved to Byron, went full-time, and been full-time ever since. I chose to specialize in ultras only. When I first started the website, it was personal training, running, marathons, ultra running, etc. And I just found the more I niched my blogs and my kind of social media questions and answers and stuff to ultras, the busier I got. So I made a focus to go, okay, let's just focus on ultra running and just specialize on that. Spend all my time researching and knowledge learning on ultra running and not worry about 5K runs, about road half marathons, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's what I love to do, and it's what's helped me the most in terms of knowledge and business wise. So Mile27 is really just about ultra running and taking athletes more than what they thought possible. So as you would know, a lot of athletes, they kind of come from a marathon background and want something else. They don't know how to make the jump into ultra running. So it's really about helping those people make the jump into ultra running and also develop their skills or fitness in ultra running as much as possible. We've all got limited time. Most of my clients are stereotyping but busy professionals. They've got limited time. They want to make sure that the time they are spending on training is the most productive training possible. So that's what I've kind of been focused on. And my coaching is all one-to-one based. So I don't do training plans, monthly training plans, whatever. It's all week to week. Lots of interaction, lots of getting to know the client. I think as a coach, the best coach you can be to a client is if you know the client really well. And have a good relationship with your clients, and know that they've got 3 kids, and know that now they're homeschooling, so they can't do as much as they were doing before. Understand their motivations and stuff. I think if you can do that, then you're going to offer the best service possible. So that's really kind of how I've tried to build the business.
Yeah, but Runners World have got a free marathon program that you can download. So I mean, we're all redundant, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of ultra running plans downloaded for free as well, and they're all specifically designed to the individual, and they're all targeted towards the race. Because as we know, every 100K race is exactly the same. They've all got the same amount of vert, the same trails, held on the same courses in the same conditions for the same runners. So for all those of you out listening, don't worry about paying for a coach. Just go to those free online sites and download a free program, and you'll be sweet.
You can tailor it a little bit though. I mean, if the free program says this is a 12-week program, then that at least we've got a time frame to box it into. I mean, 12 weeks is enough to prepare off a spreadsheet, right?
12 weeks, look, you can go from 0 to 100K champion in 12 weeks. There's no question of that. It's we all know that endurance is built in days, not months and years. You don't become a good endurance runner over years. It's a couple of days you need. So yes.
This is brilliant. I'm loving this subtle sarcasm to everything you say, Andy. You present online obviously you're a very serious kind of a guy. Like a lot of the times I've seen you interact with people in social media, it'll be on some far flung social media group, maybe on Facebook, some one of these massive groups with hundreds of thousands of people where half of the posts are selfies and the other half are whether you should take a gun whilst you go running, and there'll be some discussion about
the best holster.
Yeah, and then suddenly Andy will step in and help try and fix a problem or perhaps stop the spread of misinformation. And to others, I kind of describe when you're typing a word into a document and a red line comes up underneath it to let you know you've got it wrong. If a coach out there or someone out there is spouting knowledge about trail and ultra and it's wrong enough to get a red line under it, Andy DuBois will not be far away.
Yeah, look, it's as we've discussed before, Kerry, I've kind of moved out of a few of those ultra running groups purely because it's a waste of my time. It's some groups you get no respect, even if you post up detailed references to all that you've talked about. It's still, but my mate went from 0 to 50k and he runs barefoot, so that must be the best thing to do. So some groups I stayed away from. Other groups like the Trail and Ultras coaching group that we've got going, the Stride Forum, and a few other groups where people with knowledge actually get a bit of respect. I spend more time on. I do it for two reasons. One, I feel sorry for the average punter who goes onto some of these forums that gets bamboozled by a whole lot of misinformation. I kind of think these poor people, they've come on here, asked a question in all honesty because they just don't know, and they're getting stuff that's just not even grey, not even that kind of grey area where, well, okay, there's some truth to this in some situations.
Yeah.
But often it's just completely wrong. It's just complete misinformation. So I try and correct or help kind of guide people to the right direction. But I also think in terms of, winning up, well, not so much winning arguments, but presenting information and getting people to change behaviours, there's a skill in that. There's a skill in kind of having a debate and kind of getting people to come onto your side. And I think the more often you have that debate, the better you get at it. The more you kind of realise that presenting the polar opposite view, whilst works for some people and some of the time you've got to go to them and kind of bring them slowly back to your way of thinking with an overwhelming display of evidence. So I think for me, debating on Facebook forums has kind of helped me clarify what people are thinking, where their heads are at, and how I can best kind of guide them towards, at least a grey zone, at least a zone where it's right some of the time and they're not too far off the mark. But more and more I'm spending more time on the sites that you get respect from and avoiding the sites that you get told that, if I want to run with a gun, well, I can. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I think probably, Andy, it's important for you to remind yourself as well that when you present those facts in a discussion that maybe is opposed to another individual and you're doing these, comment after comment after comment situations, that on top of that, perhaps presenting the information, maybe trying to convince the other person of your argument, you've actually got, in some cases, dozens or hundreds of people that are reading all of this as well, and they're getting that information as well. Yeah. So, and it's not like we're rooting for someone either way. You're actually helping other people get good quality information in those situations.
And that's the feedback I get from people saying, quite a few people, especially my clients, enjoy some of the kind of discussions, I should say, on Facebook. But it educates them. So for every person that violently disagrees with the evidence I present, there's 100 people that are going, okay, yeah, that makes sense now. I understand why.
Yeah.
So that's why I persist sometimes.
Yeah, no, when we started that Coaches Corner group, I know we got everyone together to have a quick chat, and I think the discussion as coaches is, I think probably most of us in that chat at the time we're full-time coaches, you could say professional coaches, and that we've probably disagreed about the finer points of some things in certain places over the years, that we'd fundamentally agree on really 95% or more of what coaches should be doing or athletes should be implementing. Do you want to just maybe help explain what you see as that sort of, what is the 95% that the athletes and need to be focusing on?
Yeah, look, so in terms of, we'll keep it ultra running specific. I think people forget the basics, and they want the fanciest, training session, the best speed session they can do, the best gear or whatever. And I think if you spend most of your time on the basics, then you're going to get probably better results than most people anyway, because most people don't do the basics. And as we know, the basics are consistency, showing up day after day after day, getting your runs in, not going for super long runs because your mate wants you to go for, and then having the next 2 weeks off because you're injured from that super long run. So being consistent day after day, week after week, as much as possible. Running your easy runs easy. I mean, we see it all the time that you've got a 4-hour marathoner who's running just under 6-minute Ks for their marathon, and their long runs are 6-minute 15 Ks. Like, you've got 3-minute marathoners running their long runs at 4 to 4.5 minute Ks, like a minute and a half, 50% slower than their marathon pace. Yet you've got 6-minute K marathoners running their long runs at like 5% slower than their marathon pace. So I think doing those long runs easy, your recovery runs easy, and then saving your fresh legs for the hard runs to do them hard. I think those simple things that no good coach is going to disagree on. We're all going to say, do your easy runs easy, do your long runs easy, do your hard runs hard, and be consistent about it. And you're going to get further than most people, because most people don't do that. Most people are impatient. Most people want to see an improvement after a month or after 6 weeks, without realizing that improvement comes from years and years and years of training. Not to say you don't get improvements in 6 weeks, but the best improvements come from being patient over time. I mean, I know when I first started training, my long runs were 5-minute Ks, and then 3 years later they were 4 minutes 20. 3 years later, not 6 weeks or 12 weeks, but 3 years later, of training 11 months of the year consistently, that happened. Now, people say, I want to get back up to 80K a week or 100K a week, and they go from 50 to 70 to 80 to 100, and then 2 weeks later they're going, I'm feeling great, and 3 weeks later they're injured. It's like, well, if you went from 50K to 52K and added 2 or 3K a week, in a year's time you'd be doing 120, having never moved your kilometers per week by more than a couple of K a week. So I think patience is so underrated and so important for all athletes out there. And I think, as coaches, we kind of try and drum that into our clients. You can't expect to go from 50K a week to 100K a week in a month. You can't expect to go from a 20K trail run to a 40K trail run in 6 weeks without massive risk of injuries. So I think the basics of just consistency, easy runs and hard runs is something that all of us are going to agree upon. And where we may not so much disagree, but where we may apply things differently is the nitty-gritty details of what those speed sessions might look like, what those tempo sessions might look like, and whenabouts they might fit into the plan. But we're talking minor details, not the major things.
Yeah, that was a really great summary. I think you've nailed it. When you started talking about, I think the volume and the amount of easy runs and all of that sort of stuff, it got me thinking, like we often hear the question about junk miles. What's your take on junk miles?
Yeah, look, at junk miles, I think a lot of people have junk miles around the wrong way. I think a lot of people think that super easy run they do with their kid or with their dog or with a slower friend is the junk miles. Mm-hmm. And the faster run that they do with the mate who's just a fraction faster than them is the more productive miles. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you guys would agree it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
You could run, like I've just started a streak. Now, I've never done a running streak before, really. I've done 22 days now, which is not much. I mean, a lot of people run 7 days a week and they have done for years. But for me, it's quite a big thing given, 2 young kids and sleep deprivation, as we were talking about before. But the key to running consistently all the time is to keep those easy runs super easy. So when I'm running my easy runs 5:30, 5:40 minute Ks, now for me that just feels stupidly slow. And I'm getting passed by people that, I look at them when they pass me and think, they shouldn't really be passing me. They really shouldn't. And I've got to swallow my ego and just go, you know what, it's fine. This is an easy run. Don't worry about it. It's an easy run. And I think, people think that, if they can run a little bit faster with a mate, they're kind of getting pushed along and that's going to help them. But unless that run happens to be a fast finish long run or a tempo run, they're actually doing junk miles. They're actually putting at risk the longer run, the harder runs, because they're not allowing the recovery on the easy runs when they should be running easy. So I think, doing a super easy run with your slower partner or your kid or your dog or your slower friend, it's actually fine. That all adds up into training miles. And when there's a discussion between can you run my easy runs too hard or too slow, I'd always err on running easy runs too slow than too fast, because the downsides are way less and the upsides way more compared to running easy runs too fast. You're not going to gain that much extra fitness by running them a little bit faster, and you're going to potentially lose more by sacrificing hard runs and long runs and increasing risk of injury.
Yeah, the only caveat I think I'd chuck in there, that sort of 7 out of 10 RPE, that sort of middle speed junk mile that we often talk about, will occasionally have its place when we start ramping up specificity for a target. Because, of course, in a lot of racing, that 7 out of 10 starts to become your race pace, your race effort, certainly for marathoners, in around that threshold, or, even in some ultras, you're going to be working at that middle speed. So it's hard to apply these broad brush strokes where you are correct in saying those middle speeds are dangerous, but they have a purpose at a point.
Definitely. And I think that's the issue, is like people will read something and go, okay, so middle speeds are fine, 7 out of 10 is fine. It's like, well, yes, it is, but when are you putting that middle speed in? What run is it in? And how is the rest of your training for that week structured around that middle speed run? And I mean, me personally, I tend to prescribe fast finish long runs, where the last 20 or 30 minutes, you pick it up to something that feels still on the comfortable side of things, but it's certainly harder than easy. And that's only in a short phase of training leading into a race. So you get used to running a little bit faster on tired legs. That's one way I prescribe that middle speed kind of runs. So nothing wrong with them at all if they're in the right phase of training and the rest of your training is structured around that, rather than thinking, I feel pretty good today, I might push the pace a little bit today, forgetting you've got a speed session and a hill session and an extra long run on the weekend. There's no real wrong speed to run at if it's structured in a training plan. We used to think that there's this kind of zone between, zone 1 and 2 is fine, zone 3 is this kind of like never go into zone 3, it should not be running. Like, that's rubbish. The whole notion of zones is just an artificial construct on training prescription anyway.
5 zones or 7 zones? How many zones are in our zone thing? I mean, just make up a zone, right?
I mean, I see all the time people training with heart rate, and I get it a lot because I use power quite a lot, and I get a lot of people asking questions on how do I transfer heart rate zones to power zones. Like, the answer is you don't. They're different. Like, even heart rate zones, if you look up all the good heart rate coaches around, you will find probably 4 or 5 different ways of calculating heart rate zones and different ways of basing them on. Do you base it on 220 minus your age, 180 minus your age, a VO2 max calculation, a threshold calculation? Like, what do you base it on? So the whole idea of zones is just an artificial construct designed to make training a little bit easier. Whereas any good coach will go, okay, I want you running at 430 to 440 pace, or 220 to 230 watts, or 150 to 155 heart rate, because the coach knows that particular range is what they need to be doing that running at. If you look at zones, I mean, often they say zone 1. And okay, what's zone 1? Well, it might be 130 to 150 heart rate. That's a big difference. That's a range of 30, 45 seconds per K difference. Like, that's just a rough guideline. So not big on zones at all. And I think once you understand that training is a continuum, not segmented into zones, you start realizing you need to be a bit more precise with how you think about your training runs.
Yeah, but the metrics are useful, but they're also dangerous. It comes down to, I guess, in some regards, to the quality of the data that you're collecting, and then how it's applied as well. What do you say, though, when my watch says that I was unproductive? Like, my watch said I'm unproductive. What do I do now?
Stop running, Gary.
Give up.
Just don't run anymore.
Yeah, I think try another sport. I think. No, it's interesting lately. There's been quite a few questions on the forums about, my watch says I'm being unproductive. My heart rate says I've done 170 heart rate for the first 3Ks, and it drops to 140. Am I not warming up properly? My watch says I need to take 24 hours off, but it's just an easy run. Or my watch says I can run tomorrow, but I'm absolutely smashed. And I think too many people place far too much credibility on what their watches say. You've got to remember your watch's information that gives you, like the recommendations it gives you, is just based on data analysis and general populations and algorithms and stuff. It's when you think about it, what is your watch basing those recommendations on? Heart rate, speed, distance, and a whole shit of data that it's got from other people's information, which is not really tailored to you at all. I think it's not to say you can throw away your watch or throw away the recommendations it gives you, but you've got to tailor it to your own experience. Like if you see your watch says, okay, you need 12 hours recovery, and you go, no, historically that means I'm fine to run this afternoon, or historically that means I'm smashed for 3 days, then as long as your watch says the same thing, you can base that judgment on that, filtered through your own experience. If it says 12 hours, that means 2 days. Every time it says 12 hours, you go, okay, that means 2 days. So you've got to have your own filter of experience through which you can use your watch's recommendations. Hopefully your watch is consistent. I never look at those things on my watch. I never pay any attention to it. But if you ask someone who likes that kind of stuff, if you see it's consistently saying the same thing and you can filter your own experience through that, well, then great. But if sometimes after an easy runs, it says 12 hours to your next run, other times it says 3 days, or sometimes you feel like you're training hard, but it says unproductive, and sometimes it says training easy and it says productive, then just forget your watch entirely. Just use it as a GPS speed distance, but don't base any training recommendations on it because it's just not worth it. I mean, the latest Polar Watch, for example, is now says it can tell you your hydration needs.
Yes. Did you see that?
Hydration needs? A watch?
Yep.
What the hell are you basing that on?
Does that seem dangerous to you?
It does. It really does. I mean, I've read a couple articles recently where the idea that, weighing yourself before and afterwards is a good measure of your hydration loss and you should replace what you've lost. Even that concept, they're saying that, well, part of the weight you lose is substrate oxidation. So if you're 2% lighter than what you are at the start of the run, you're actually fully hydrated. So any watch that bases your hydration levels on the notion that you should be in the same weight before and after is wrong to start with. And then what can it be? It can be basing it on your weight, the weather, and the bell curve it's got of whatever information it's got. And as we know, your hydration levels are so unique to the individual. Some people can go out and sweat 3 liters in an hour. Some people in the same conditions will sweat a liter. So yeah, I'm really not a fan of giving too much importance to things like that from a watch. No, the best case scenario is you set your watch to beep every 20 minutes to remind you to eat. That's about it. I mean, that watch, the new Polar Watch, even says it can tell you how many calories to have. It's like, no, it can't.
Andy, here's an interesting one. So on that, then, we see this all the time from those that manufacture or supply race nutrition. They'll say, you burn 2,000 kilojoules in an hour, therefore you've got to put 2,000 kilojoules in. Now you know about the how we metabolize energy through our 2 primary substrates through glucose and fat burning. Well, now I'm confused. Were those 2,000 kilojoules do I need to ingest those, or were some of those fat that I've burned as well? Like it becomes quite confusing now. They've given me a little bit of information, but they might have confused me in the process. Yeah,
definitely. I think nutrition wise, we're not nutritionists, so I limit my advice to a certain point. But the advice you can't go wrong with as a starting point is 40 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. Like that's basic. How you get those carbs, what kind of foods suit your stomach and all that kind of stuff, and how much water you might have with that gets a bit more complicated. But if you can start with the basics of 40 to 60 per hour and then play around with it from there, then you can't go too wrong. So any discussion on how many calories you burn is a moot point, because it doesn't matter how many calories you burn. You can't consume more than what your stomach can handle. Yep. So whether you're burning 800 calories an hour, 1,000 calories an hour, 400 calories an hour, it makes zero difference, because you can only your stomach can only process so much. And that's another thing you see on forums. You see, how do I work out how many calories I burn? Oh, my watch can do that for me. It's like, well, no, it can't, for one. And two, even if it could, it's a moot point, because what you want to know is how many calories can my stomach absorb? And your watch certainly can't tell you that. So nutrition, I think you got to keep it basic, and then when that doesn't work, get some help. Go see Jeff Gaskell or someone like that who's an expert in the topic, and get some proper help on the types of things you should be having. Because as you know, it's one of those things you can train your ass off and do the best training ever, and then 40k into your race, your stomach goes sour, and you've lost 3 hours trying to get back to feeling normal again. All that training comes to zip. You could have done half the training and still finish in the same time, which is gutting as an athlete and as a coach to see your athletes go through that. So nutrition is something that I think people, they kind of get through their 4-hour training runs or their 3-hour training runs, or every now and then they might do a 6-hour run and go, my stomach was great, I've got it nailed. And then comes to race day and it all goes to pot, and you kind of think, with just a bit more focus and a bit more effort, you could have trained the stomach and had a great race. It's so disappointing as a coach to see that happen.
Is there, do you feel like there's one single answer when it comes to nutrition and hydration, or do you feel like not only is it individualized for an athlete? I know you'll agree to this, but almost also that the goalposts are shifting. You mentioned, take some person that goes out for a run and loses 3 liters of water in their first hour. Now we've got a hydration plan, 3 hours of running, and I have to drink 9 liters of water. Like, I'm going to lose 3 liters in the first hour. Does that mean I'm going to lose 3 liters in the second hour? I need 1 gel in the first hour. Does that mean I need 1 gel in my 10th hour? The goalposts are shifting. So how do you refine that in the information that you give to athletes heading out for an ultra?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. And I think that's why people can get through 4-hour training runs and feel fine. Because as we know, the first couple of hours you're using stored glycogen anyway, so you've got plenty of energy there. And then so you really only need a couple of hours of nutrition. So to get through that, a few gels, a banana, that's it. Maybe 500 mils of tailwind, and that'll get you through your 4 hours. And you go, energy levels are great, stomach was great, nailed it. But you're not even putting your stomach into stress then. It's not even tested in the slightest. So I think what I tend to recommend is, on your long training runs, particularly as you get closer to your race, you should start taking race nutrition from the first minute and pretend you're already 4 or 5 hours in. So, your stomach gets used to starting with nutrition from the get-go. Once you get used to that, then things like, taking nutrition on a tempo run. So doing 2 by 20-minute efforts, but taking nutrition in whilst you do that, because it's a lot harder to take nutrition in when you're actually working a bit harder.
Yeah.
And so just giving yourself a few more opportunities to test nutrition out and test the stomach out, because you might find that in a 4-hour run, normally absolutely fine. When I start taking it from the first hour, by the third hour, that gel's not going down so well. And in a tempo run, by the second tempo effort, stomach's not good at all. All right, now we've got some information we can start tweaking around with. We can start trying a few different things. But unless you test it, you don't know. In terms of the changing requirements throughout, all the research shows that you get slower in an ultra. The best runners in the world get slower, like your pace drops. There's research on 100k road races, which you think, of any ultra in the world, 100k road race will be the race where the elites would pace it evenly and their pace at the start would be the same pace at the end. Nope, doesn't happen. Even the elites slow down in the last 40k, 50k of a 100k road race. So if they slow down, the rest of us are definitely slowing down. Now, if you're slowing down, you're burning less calories. Your stomach is in a better position to use nutrition because you're not working as hard. But then it might be worse because you've been taking gels for the last 4 or 5 hours. You'll need less hydration because you're not going as fast. So you're not generating as much heat, but it might be in the middle of the day when it's hotter, so you might need more hydration. So there's all these kind of factors which you really have to think about in terms of the race. Like if you're doing UTMB, then 6 hours into the race, you're going into the middle of the night. So it's going to be cooler, so you'll need less hydration. If you're doing GNW, you start at 6 in the morning, 6 hours later, it's now midday, it's in the hottest part of the day, you need more hydration. So that's where a good coach is going to help pull apart the race in your training and look at how we can tweak training, how we can apply nutrition in your training sessions to help give you the best chance possible in the race, to have the skills to adjust as you go. Not so much a set plan, although a set plan is good, but as a good coach, you should be able to give them some signs that, okay, if you're kind of feeling like your energy levels are down, but you're feeling a bit sick in the stomach, what should you do? Like, what's your best course of action? Versus if you're feeling a little bit low in energy, but your stomach's feeling fine, what should you do? Because the two things are vastly different. If your stomach's going south and you're feeling low in energy, the last thing you want to do is put shitloads of stuff back in your stomach, because there's probably plenty of stuff in your stomach anyway. When we've all had experiences, or as coaches have had athletes that have kind of felt crap, 3 hours later thrown up, and everything they've eaten or drunk in the last 3 hours just comes straight back out again. So it means that everything they had wasn't being digested, which is why they were feeling so low in energy. So the last thing you want to do for them is put more and more stuff in the stomach. So for someone like that, maybe a carbohydrate mouthwash where you sluice it around your mouth, spit it out again, will get them through the next hour, give their stomach a chance to settle, and maybe get them back on track. Versus if you're feeling low in energy and stomach's feeling great, you could have a big drink of Coke or something, get you back up, get back on normal nutrition plan, and you're good to go. So giving your athletes kind of a few tools and a few cues on what might be the cause of the issues and what might be the remedies gives them a much better chance of troubleshooting throughout the race than a set plan of 600 mils of water per hour, 40 grams of carbs per hour, 1 gel every 45 minutes, and you're good to go, because it'll probably fail if you do that.
Love it.
Man, that's a massive topic. I feel like we could cover 2 hours or more just on nutrition, hydration, the mitochondria, GI distress, what the research is telling us. I'm actually quite excited that I think that probably this is the forefront for ultra running, is really understanding what's happening in that gut biome and how we can prepare ourselves for ultra marathons. And I mean, it's not going to come from coaches; it's going to come from specialists in the field. But
this is don't really know. Even the specialists, still, there's so many variables. We still don't really know how to tweak things for an individual with precision. We still don't have a series of tests where you can go, okay, here's the test. Here's your recommendation. We've got, experts like Steph Gaskell and stuff have got, some good tests and some good guidelines, but we still don't know for sure how to tailor nutrition and stuff uniquely for each individual for a particular situation. We're getting better, but yeah, it's a growing field and will be the next forefront of improving performance for a lot of people, I think.
And doesn't it suck when you get it right? You've got an athlete, a well-performing athlete that does it, boom, 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 and they have a great race on this, and then they roll out that same plan, maybe even the same race a year later, and it all goes south. And you're like, what? I don't understand. We didn't change anything. I don't get it.
That's the frustrating thing is when you, because as a coach, you think, well, they nailed it last time. It's the same race or similar race or similar conditions. Just do what you did last time. It worked. And then it doesn't work. It's like,
I hate it.
That's the human body. Because who knows? They may have changed their diet over the last 6 months. They may have gone from meat eater to vegetarian, or they may have increased a lot of fruit, changed the gut biomes, which may have affected their absorption of whatever they were having last time. There's just so much stuff that could have happened that we don't know yet.
Well, we'll save that one because I've got a quick fire round, so we're going to go into that in a bit. But
okay. So my question is around strength work, Andy. I know that you're a real proponent for strength work, and that you've got some quite set views, I guess you could describe, on what strength work should look like for ultra runners. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah. So look, the evidence on strength work, and I'll start talking about the typical prescribed strength work, which is heavy squats, deadlifts, heavy weights, that kind of stuff, as opposed to light weights, more repetitions. Because that's where most strength coaches have come from. And I've done the strength coaching course. I learned all that. I know how to do a power clean, et cetera, et cetera. So I've come from that background as well. The evidence on runners, on the benefits of that strength training, is quite comprehensive, that it works. It does improve your running efficiency. It does improve performance. However, that's 3K, 5K, 10K. Once you get to marathon, it's not quite as robust in terms of being positive results, because a lot of the evidence says it improves your fast twitch muscle fibers, improves your neuromuscular coordination, allows you to have a faster finish at the end. Now, if you're doing a 3K race or a 5K race, the ability to kick at the end is great. It's fantastic, and it's going to improve performance. The ability to improve your running economy, so you're using less energy to run the same speed, is obviously going to improve performance. No question at all. However, once it gets to ultras, things get a little bit murkier. Like, there's not so much evidence, but certainly a discussion on the fact that ultra runners may reduce running efficiency to preserve muscle downward, kind of minimize muscle damage, or run in a way that means we don't hurt as much. as we get further and further into the race. So potentially any improvements in running efficiency may be negated later in the race when we're running the best way we can to minimize the soreness and still run as fast as we can. Fast twitch fibers are a complete waste of time for ultra runners. The ability to kick hard at the end is a complete waste because we don't kick harder. Even the elite racers, they don't kick. They slow down less than other races. So the argument that really heavy strength work is the best way to train ultra runners is not as clear cut when it comes to ultra runners. Now, combined with that, a lot of ultra runners, A, don't like heavy strength work, and B, don't like going to a gym. So if there was another way of training, strength training for ultra runners that was maybe just as effective, I'd argue more, but some would argue less, but that's a moot point. But if it was kind of almost as effective, let's say, you could do it at home, didn't involve going to a gym, and didn't involve taking 6 months to a year or more to learn how to squat heavy, deadlift heavy,
yeah,
then maybe that would be a better recommendation to give clients. People, when they don't understand where I come from a strength training point of view, think it's more just about giving lightweights more repetition. So just doing 3 sets of 20 lunges. But that's not really what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that if you can do lightweight dynamic training, it's going to have more carryover into an ultra runner's performance. So, for example, if you do jump lunges and you hold a medicine ball, and as you land on your right leg, the medicine ball rotates around to the right. And as you land on your left leg, your medicine ball rotates onto the left. You've now got a dynamic, lightweight exercise that's specific to running. Now, I'm not saying everyone jumps into jump lunges. There are a number of ways you can build into that. For example, just lunging forward and rotating your arms around to the right at speed, not kind of done really slow motion and control. It's got to be done dynamically, otherwise it's not dynamic. Mm-hmm. So my kind of strength philosophy is saying, well, can we take dynamic, lightweight strength training, reduce it down to a level where it can be done safely, and then progress it up more and more and more so it can be challenged and become harder and harder without the use of a 20 kilogram, 40 kilogram, 60 kilogram bar and mm-hmm. the use of going into a gym. And my experience is the answer is yes. That's not to say, look, if someone's doing heavy strength training in the gym, I'm not going to say don't do it because you're already doing it. You already know how to squat heavy, and that's great. And you enjoy it, so keep doing it. But if you're coming to me with no strength training background and asking, look, should I go to a gym? Should I learn how to squat? My personal trainer at the gym can teach me how to squat. I'm going to say, look, if you're motivated enough to do exercises at home, I can give you all you need to do at home. Of course, that relies on being motivated enough to do it at home, and some people aren't. Some people need the discipline of going to the gym and having someone look after them. Having come from a gym background, though, and this is a stereotypical generalization of gym instructors and personal trainers, most of them don't know what they're talking about. Having said that, there are, of course, great personal trainers, but I've been in the personal training industry for 20 years. I've taught personal trainers. I've mentored personal trainers. I've seen literally thousands of personal trainers, and a lot of them really don't have an understanding of good strength training, particularly not for runners. But I said all the time, and when I was mentoring personal trainers, I'd have trainers come to me and say, look, my client wants to do a marathon. What should I give them for strength training? Like, you've never run before. You're somebody who spent the whole life in the gym looking at, trying to look good in a mirror. And that's fine. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a bodybuilder or wanting to get big biceps. Absolutely fine. But you've got no experience in training runners. And now you're asking me for like a 2 minutes little kind of bit of advice to go ahead and train a runner for a marathon. It's like, sorry, that's not, I can't do that. Like, it's just, you're shortchanging your client. Your client thinks that you know a lot about strength training and thinks you can apply it to them. But I mean, the reality is the strength training courses for personal trainers is woefully kind of inadequate for what's expected by the public. So unless you've got a particularly good personal trainer, and there are some out there are some that go way beyond what their basic education gives them, and they do course after course after course, and there are some fantastic trainers out there. But that's what you've got to be looking for if you want someone to train you in the gym. If you don't, then there are really effective ways to train at home just using dynamic strength training, using full body weight, lunges, one leg squats, hops, jumps, skips, etc. that are very, very effective.
I asked Maddie this question, and I'll ask you as well. What's your bang for buck favorite strength exercise?
Yeah, jump lunges.
Yeah?
Jump lunges, yeah.
Cool.
Particularly with different arm movements. So
Okay.
I describe one with the rotation aspect.
Yeah.
Because as you rotate, so if you've got your right leg landing forward, as you rotate your arms around to the right,
Mm-hmm.
you're giving your right glutes a massive dynamic stretch. So it's really good for firing up the glutes. If you, instead of rotating to the right, if you throw your arms up overhead behind you, you've now loaded up your hip flexors and your core. If you lean forward and try and touch your toes when you land, you've now loaded up your hamstrings. So there's different ways of using your arms to fire up different muscles within that lunge. So applying some arm tweaks to a jump lunge is such an effective way to do it. And put a small 2-kilogram weight in your hand, a medicine ball or something, and you've got a great, fantastic workout.
We've been doing daily 10 or 15 minutes workouts with a lot of our athletes every morning because we've all been in lockdown. So it's been a way to sort of keep them engaged. Those that would otherwise perhaps go to the gym or do other sessions. And I think it's important for them to understand that now they're going to hate us for jump lunges, but they need to direct that hate towards Andy DuBois and not us. But that's happening tomorrow morning. Squad wide will mostly be jump lunges.
Oh no, Andy, I'm going to hate you tomorrow.
Explosive strength.
Just one more thing on that before we go to the next question. A lot of people think kind of plyometric explosive stuff is like, jumping off a 1 meter block and jumping down landing or jumping up super high. Like plyometric training is skipping. It's just jumping up and down on the spot. It's just hopping up and down on the spot. It doesn't have to be super hard. You can start with just kind of bouncing on the spot for 20 reps and you've already started plyometric training. So I think understanding where the load can start and progressing it rather than thinking, oh, Andy said plyometric training is great. YouTube, plyometric training, box jumps.
Yeah, always box jumps.
Yeah.
Bloody Andy.
I think you're right. You've got to, like with running, you have to scaffold things, right? Like start simple and keep layering up. So we wouldn't have somebody that's a new runner go out and tear their legs off doing reps of speed work. So same applies with plyo, definitely.
And I wouldn't do jump lunges as the go-to exercise for a new client. It's built up after doing stationary split squats and then stepping forward lunges, stepping back lunges, walking lunges. You gradually build it up and build up the framework to handle that.
Yeah.
Just before we leave strength for a bit, can you explain to those listening we talk about strength work and everyone immediately thinks clanging and banging and weights and concentric strength stuff where you're heavy lifting or doing something where a muscle is tightening. Can you briefly just jump into the importance of eccentric strength for ultra runners and why?
Yeah, look, I think if you could, not that you really can, but if you could choose concentric or eccentric and only do one, then you would never do concentric. You'd only ever do eccentric. You can't separate the two. You can focus more on one than the other. But eccentric, as you guys know, it's the loading you get when you land. It's a muscle contracting or trying to contract when it's lengthening, and that's when the most damage is done. So. When it comes to improving ultra performance, some coaches are really big on fitness and giving you the best aerobic engine possible. And not to say that isn't hugely important, but when you look at the average ultra runner and what the limiting factors are in the last 20, 30K of the race, it's not their breathing, it's not their heart rate, it's the fact their legs are smashed. So if you can do some kind of training where you can increase the fatigue resistance of the legs so they're not as smashed in the back half of an ultra, then they can run faster. So that's all about eccentric training. Eccentric training is running downhill fast, it's dynamic, it's jump lunges, it's landing under speed and load. But people kind of think that it's constrained to downhill running or strength work. Running slow is eccentric training. If you take somebody who's never run before and take them out for a 5K run, their legs are going to be sore afterwards because every time your foot hits the ground, you're slowing down and lengthening the muscle. That's eccentric training. Of course, for most runners, it's minimal running on the flat, and you've got to either run faster or run downhill or do strength training to get some kind of eccentric loading benefit. That's another reason speed training is so recommended for ultra runners, because you get more eccentric loading. because you're running faster. So therefore, every step you have to decelerate more speed. So strength training is really the main benefits to me is the eccentric loading you get, and therefore better able to run later in an ultra, and then the injury prevention you get from having a well-rounded strength training program.
Yeah, anyone that doesn't think there's any value in eccentric training has never run from Queen Vic down to Jamison Creek and wondered why they can't run anymore.
Exactly.
Following up on that, I think that you've touched on it. People often question the role of speed work in ultra training. Can you just give us a quick summary of why you're a fan, apart from the eccentric?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of improving your all-day running pace, you've kind of got two ways of doing it. You can either push it up from the bottom, which is doing lots of volume, lots of long, slow, easy miles, or pulling it up from the top, which means you run faster than what you can normally run and gradually pull that speed up. So you end up running faster at the same effort level. So running faster is speed training. You know, that's the only effective way, well, it's the main effective way to improve your running speed. What that speed training looks like, you know, different coaches will have different ideas about the best way to do it. But most of us, I think, can agree that a varied approach on speed training is optimal, and a range of intensities from, you know, even as quick as, you know, 1 minute reps, progressing all the way up to 20, 30-minute tempo efforts, and structuring that throughout your training phase according to what race, and also what your strengths and weaknesses are. Like, you know, we've all, as coaches, we've all had athletes who maybe have come from a track background, that they're good at 400 meters, 200 meters, 800 meters. And they may have great short speed, but, you know, their 400 meter pace indicates they should be able to run a 10K at this speed, but they're much, much slower.
Yeah.
So for those athletes, they're better off doing more longer sustained efforts. And then you've got someone whose half marathon speed is barely any quicker than their 10K speed, which is barely any quicker than their 1K speed. So they're better off doing some shorter reps. So I think speed training should be tailored to the individual, but, you know, there is literally not a good ultra runner anywhere in this world who doesn't do some form of speed training. Even someone like Killian, I read a workout of his a while back, you know, 3 5K reps, and the 5K reps were just over 15 minutes pace for each of the 5Ks.
Oh,
yeah, brutal. Well, that's a 3 by 15-minute tempo run, which you kind of think, okay, that's a solid workout, but you know, that's doable for anybody, just not a 3-minute K pace. So I think, you know, if you're not doing speed training, usually it's because you don't know how, or you've had a history of getting injured doing speed training. And if you've had a history of doing it, it's usually because you've gone from doing lots of easy runs and then gone, I need to do speed training. I'll smash out 10 400s and gone, oh, now my calf's sore, or I got high hamstring tendinopathy or something. So, you know, a good coach will go, okay, I want you to do 10 by 400s, but I want the first one at 4-minute 50K pace. And then I want the last one no quicker than 4-minute 30K pace. And I know that you could probably do them at 4-minute 15K pace, but that's not the goal today. The goal today is to gradually allow your body to get used to the load, and over the next few weeks we'll get quicker and quicker and quicker until eventually you can smash them all out at 4-minute K pace. But don't do that today, please, because you'll just get injured. So any good coach will kind of tailor the speed training at a level where the client can handle it, and they'll not only handle it physically but handle it mentally, because some of our clients haven't done speed training before, and let's face it, it hurts. Like, we love it. Like, let's face it, you and I, we go out and we smash out some hill reps and go, that was awesome.
Yep.
And some of our clients go, that really hurt, and like, I wanted to quit after 6 reps, and I was wondering why the hell I was doing this, why am I doing 90-second reps when I want to run 100K? Like, the connection between, you know, hurt versus benefit really isn't there yet. They don't understand how to do it. They just don't really get it. So I think as coach, not only it comes down to education, it comes down to making sure it's pitched at the right level physically and mentally, so they can enjoy the session and get some kind of sense of accomplishment from it. Because you know what it's like, if you give someone a session and they finish it going, I feel like I could have done more, versus, oh my God, I was smashed and I couldn't do the last 2 reps.
Yeah.
It's a very different experience, and not many people respond well to the latter.
Yeah.
A lot of us respond well to the former, thinking I could have done more. And that's, as a coach, you want your client to feel like.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Andy. did you want to do your quick fire round, or shall I ask some more of mine?
I guess on that, there's a little bit of an art to being a coach and understanding that, our primary role is to assign work. And a lot of coaches, part-time or full-time it's pretty easy to push out workloads, but very difficult to understand really how the athlete is responding to that workload. And perhaps the finest art is to know each morning when an athlete gets out of bed, whether they're capable of doing that session that was assigned to them that day, that run, or whether it's a recovery / adaptation day. And we start to get into the realm of, non-functional and functional overloading with athletes. Yeah. How do we do that? I mean, how do you do that as a coach? I mean, you can't go and write a program for 6 weeks and say, I'm going to know in 6 weeks' time that that's the right loading for you, and just go out and do this stuff. How do you tailor things to suit?
Yeah, so first of all, I only do a week program at a time. I think any more than a week, you're guessing. Even a week, with a week's program, you're assuming that in 7 days' time or 6 days' time, they're going to be okay to do a particular run. But I think you have to have a business model that works. Otherwise, it's impossible to give any help at all. So I think a week is a good time frame to plan in advance. But then it comes down to a really good relationship between the athlete and coach. Involves the coach asking the right questions and involves the athlete giving the right feedback. So any new clients I take on, I'm really asking a lot of questions and encouraging a lot of feedback as to how did that session feel? Did it feel like you had more to give? Did it feel like you're at your limits? How did you respond physically afterwards? How did you feel mentally afterwards? Obviously, I've got the objective data. I've got either their heart rate, their run speeds, or their power data, and that's part of the puzzle for sure. But I think if you only look at the objective data, then you're missing a big part of the picture. I think you have to kind of get to know the client and get to know, what it's like. You've got some clients who will tell you every niggle they have, will tell you, that session was hard, that session was easy, blah, blah, blah. Clients, you won't hear anything from them until they say, oh, I've had this Achilles problem for the last 6 weeks. Like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
So I think, as coach, I'm always asking my clients, how did it feel last week? Any niggles, any sore spots? And the more information you can get from them on that, the better you can tailor things. But also asking things like, how's your stress levels? How's your sleep patterns going? Is your diet changed at all? Are you enjoying a session? How's your motivation levels? All that kind of stuff can give you clues onto whether I just think this athlete needs an easy week. The objective data is not really saying that, but the feedback I'm getting from them, they're just sounding a little bit tired. They're still hitting the targets in their run, but I'm really getting the sense that we need to back things off. And as a good coach, with a good relationship, often you hear after easy week, Andy, I'm feeling so much better after that easy week. You nailed it. You're like, I really needed it then. I think, okay, good. But unless you have that open communication with your athletes, unless you ask the right questions and encourage that feedback, then I think you just guessing.
Yeah.
Heart rate variability is something that's come out now, and I'm sure you've read about it, both of you. And I think there's evidence to say that it can be used effectively. But then you've got the practicalities. You've got, if you've got an Olympic athlete who does nothing but train, and they wake up in the morning and their heart rate says that they should have an easy session. So the long run, maybe they should just do a recovery run and move their long run to 2 days' time. Great. It works fine. They can ring the coach up and go, Coach, this is what happened. Coach goes, yep, okay, here's your training plan adjusted. Away you go. Perfect. Now you've got someone who works 5 days a week. They're due to do the long run on Sunday. Their watch may tell them their heart rate's a fraction higher. What should they do? Should they skip the long run, move it to Tuesday? Oh, hang on, I can't do it Tuesday because I work all day. Okay, then I can't do my long run until next week. But last week I had my long run off as well because it was my kid's birthday party. And the week before I was sick and I only did an hour and a half. So now it's 3 weeks or 4 weeks since my last long run. What should I do? So now it gets a whole lot more complicated. And I think as coach, all you can do is give your athletes the tools to make that decision for themselves. So one thing might be, look, okay, if you've got an athlete who uses heart rate, resting heart rate, for example, and it's a bit high in the morning, I would say, look, go out for your run, start off super easy, easier than normal, to see how you feel. Don't be locked into doing that 3 hours. If you find after 20, 30 minutes that, hey, I feel fine, then great. If you find that it's just a bit more of a struggle than usual, then back off. Either back the intensity off or cut the run short. So give them some tools that they can use to kind of do the best they can for that day, rather than go, just skip it. Oh, no, hang on, that means no long runs for 4 weeks. Yeah, it's what's the best case scenario? Like, it's a juggling act, and nothing's perfect when you talk about coaching people with full-time jobs or families. There's never a perfect situation because there's always stresses you can't measure. So you've just got to give the best case option.
Yeah, it's one of the complexities of being a coach, isn't it? Is that to improve an athlete, their optimal path for improvement is to apply as much stress as you can to that athlete, such that they are adapting to it and not accumulating too much stress and not getting injured. So in some regards, you're trying to sail that athlete into the wind as hard as you can without breaking them, and you don't know what that breaking point is until the snapping sound starts.
Yeah, that's right. And as coaches, we try and figure out cues to that snapping sound. We're trying to figure out little indications that we might tell us to back off a fraction. It comes down to, like, I often get asked about easy week. Should you schedule an easy week every 3 or 4 weeks? And I think, look, it depends on the athlete. If you've got an athlete that's living a very structured life, in other words, the variables that may affect their training are fairly well controlled. They haven't got 18-month-old that's waking up at 2:30 in the morning. They haven't got a highly stressful job. Things are in control. Then, as a good coach, you should be able to avoid an easy week. Like, if you look at the elite Kenyans, like guys like Kipchoge don't have easy weeks. They just train consistently year in, year out, week in, week out. Almost, they don't even really taper for peak races. There's a small drop, but not much. So ideally, I don't prescribe easy weeks. Having said that, obviously, not many athletes fall into that category of having a life that their stresses are very well controlled. Then it comes down to, do I slot one in every 4 weeks? Or do I try and listen to the athlete and just take advantage of, work's really busy this weekend, I can't get out Saturday and I can only do an hour Sunday. Okay, let's do the easy week now. Or, okay, I'm sick at the moment. Okay, here's your easy week. It's my kid's birthday party this weekend. I can't train. Okay, here's your easy week. So it's knowing when to kind of keep pushing and when to kind of take advantage of a external training stressor to make an easy week is another skill of being a coach.
Right, okay, let's get into the quickfire round. I know your time's pretty precious. Assuming that an athlete isn't injured, we're just talking about an everyday run-of-the-mill kind of a person, as concise an answer as you can possibly couple together. So it might be a few sentences, it might be a paragraph, but tell me about the perfect shoe for me.
The one that fits, the one that feels the most comfortable. Simple as that. That's specific to, it's relevant for the terrain you're running on. So obviously, it's going to be a road shoe if you're a road runner, a trail shoe if you're a trail runner. Obviously, with trail shoes, if you're running in mud, you want someone with decent lugs. If you're running on buffed out fire trails, you don't need that. But in terms of, other than the grip or whatever, feels the most comfortable. The research on gait testing and stuff is just not concrete enough to base any shoe recommendation on.
Okay, tell me about the role of stretching for trail and ultra runners.
Static stretching, complete waste of time. Don't bother doing it at all. Dynamic stretching, yes, is good if you know how to do it properly.
But what if it feels good?
Don't care.
Okay, what about the role of massage?
Recommended. Research is kind of swaying in the positives. It's not 100% in the positives, but suggests that there is a beneficial effect. So if you can get it regularly, get it.
Tell me about the benefits of maffetone training for building a ultramarathon program.
Complete waste of time. Don't recommend it at all. Keep your easy runs easy. Don't use a unscientific formula like 180 minus your age.
Tell me about the role of sodium and electrolytes in ultra distance and their impact on cramping. Now, we could be an hour on this, right? Okay, so let's just start with sodium. Let's start sodium's an electrolyte. What's the role of sodium and electrolytes in ultra running?
All right. So because this is a quick fire round, I'll keep it really simple. Although the research is mixed, it's looking more and more like we don't need to take sodium or electrolytes in races or training.
And the relevance of that to cramping?
Sodium will help cramping in the short term. The sodium tablet you took 2 hours ago is not going to help your cramping now. So taking something when you feel the onset of cramp there will be a beneficial effect.
What about magnesium then?
The research doesn't show any real signs of magnesium depletion in ultra running.
How good is and how important, is a running gait analysis for trail and ultra runners? And how important is cadence?
Good question. Gait analysis, if you're not injured, I wouldn't worry about. In terms of how important is cadence, again, unless you're injured, I wouldn't worry about it, or unless you can have a gait analysis, I wouldn't worry about it. Because cadence means nothing unless you can show that you're overstriding. And a low cadence doesn't mean you're overstriding, and a high cadence doesn't mean you're not overstriding.
Man, you're loving these questions, aren't you? They're good questions. So tell me the value of, obviously fat adaptation is so important, and training and racing in the complete absence of carbohydrates is optimal. The role of glycogen depleted training and fat adaptation for endurance athletes.
Look, I think there's some benefit. I think it's important not to get too caught up in it. I try and get my guys and girls to do, if they can do a 3-hour long run with no breakfast, no calories, then I think you've ticked the fat adaptation box. Any more than that, I think it starts to get risky in terms of calorie depletion, risk of injuries, risk of burnout, etc.
Nice one. We touched on metrics earlier. Obviously, you're a fan of power. It has some value. Heart rate, pace. What's the role of metrics in assigning work and pace management for athletes in races?
In races, you look, I think power is the only real metric apart from RPE, which is not really a metric because it's subjective, that you can use for pacing ultras. Pace obviously varies too much. Heart rate varies too much. So power is the only metric I've come across that is of any use at all in working out what pace you should run out in an ultra.
Obviously, the perfect diet for an athlete is to be paleo. No, wait, keto. No, wait, vegan. What's the perfect diet for a ultra runner?
Look, I think with diet, there are people that will benefit more with paleo, benefit more with vegan, etc. But for the general population, a good healthy diet with a mix of fruit and vegetables and carbs and getting enough calories in is all you really need to worry about. Don't make it too complicated. Eat healthy, eat enough, and you'll tick all the boxes you need to.
What's the role of a couple of beers after a long run? We're doing that, or we're not doing that?
Yeah, if you like beer, I can't see any issues of having a couple after your long run. Yeah, no problems there at all.
Excellent. You've done really well, and you'll go into the final round. We'll have scores on that later. It was good. It was a good way actually to roll through. Obviously, a lot of controversial topics as well, where you get people that are really polar opposites on opinion here, and certainly a lot of discussions or debates or arguments we might see on social media covered in a lot of that stuff. And I feel like this is the 5% of stuff that people are having fights about, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. That is the problem, is that a lot of the discussion on social media is about the 5% and not about the 95%. No, people will learn a lot more if they ask more questions about the 95% than the 5%.
Yeah, one of the great sort of Lydiard style coaches that older guys that in the area that drops into our house every now and again. I think he coined it quite well, and he said that people spend all of their time looking for the loose change under the table that they forget that there's a $10 note sitting on top of the table. Yeah,
definitely agree with that. And the problem with that, it's not sexy to talk about 5 30-minute easy runs. It's not an interesting conversation. It's not sexy. It's like, oh, really? Is that what I have to do? Like, yeah.
You'll get way more kudos on the hard run or the long run on Strava because there's some cleverly designed bling built into it than you will on the much more important regular daily maintenance run.
Oh, but as a coach, I get my jollies off seeing consistent training. Like if you see a good juicy block of training, that is when I get excited.
Yeah.
Totally right. I mean, you know, I don't know if you guys use Training Peaks, but using Training Peaks, I like to see green squares, all green squares. It means they've done the session as prescribed. And as you said, Ali, you know, looking at some of my clients, the biggest thrill I get of checking their program is the fact they've done their long run and their easy run slower this week than they did last week, because that's what I told them to do. So, finally, you know, because that's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. And doing the hard sessions really well. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gold.
I feel you. Oh, it's been a really great chat, Andy. I feel like we could go on all day.
Well, we could.
There's plenty of fun stuff to discuss as well, like, you know, like favorite races and, you know, all of the where to from here and, you know, but it almost like it'd be divergent from this discussion. It would require its own one in itself. But we've encapsulated a lot of this, you know, maybe the science and research stuff, which I think is really valuable. And I hope that the Trail and Ultra group, you know, appreciate this and your time, because you're a professional. So this is time not on the tools. And, you know, maybe they can have a GoFundMe for interviews with Andy.
Interrupting Andy's nap time.
Yeah.
No, thanks heaps for the chat. And
pleasure. Thanks for your time as well.
It's been great.
Thanks, Andy.
Take care.
No problems, guys. That was good.
Cheers, mate. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.